which have general consultative status with the ECOSOC of the United Nations. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Yusuf Daud, representing the Acheh Sumatra National Liberation Front.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my genuine appreciation for your presence here today. And I am also grateful to the UNPO and the Nonviolent Radical Party for having organized this event. To begin with, let me first tell you briefly about my country's background. Aceh is located at the northern tip of the island of Sumatra and has around 6 million inhabitants. Aceh was the center of a powerful empire for several centuries and has a long and impressive history of resistance to outside domination. Aceh is also abundantly rich in natural resources: oil, gas, gold, platinum, tin, rubber, etc. Yet today, Aceh is the second largest province among the 33 provinces in Indonesia. For hundreds of years before the arrival of the European powers to Southeast Asia, and for many centuries thereafter, Aceh remained an internationally recognized independent state, having diplomatic relations with the rest of the world. Larousse Grand Dictionnaire Universel described the Kingdom of Aceh as the most dominant nation in the East Indies towards the end of the 16th until the first half of the 17th century. When most parts of Malay Archipelago were incorporated into the Dutch East Indies, Aceh happened to be one of the most difficult areas to be conquered. After the Japanese capitulation in 1945, the Dutch attempted to restore their former colonial empire, but Aceh was the only place where they did not even try to return. In 1949, 7 years after their withdrawal from Aceh, the Dutch signed a treaty with the newly fabricated Indonesia and transferred their non-existent sovereignty over Aceh to Indonesia without referendum or any consultation with the people of Aceh, and against all principles of decolonization of the UN. So this is how Aceh was illegally made part of Indonesia. On the basis of the above-mentioned historical status of Aceh as an independent state, and on the basis of the Dutch illegal annexation of Aceh to Indonesia, Acheh Sumatra National Liberation Front, or Asnlf, was then established in 1976, and the Ray Declaration of Independent Aceh was issued on December 4th in the same year. The re-establishment of Aceh as a successor state is supported by a number of UN resolutions, such as Resolution 1540 and the Resolution 2621. Ladies and gentlemen, before discussing about human rights situation in Indonesia, especially in Aceh, South Malacca, and West Papua, I would like to refresh our memories by citing some quotes from renowned human rights organizations pertaining to 30 Indonesia in the Pre-Aceh Movement, or GAM, to Helsinki, Finland, and signed the peace accord known as Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. One of the many provisions in the MOU is the establishment of two human rights institutions, Trust and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, and Human Rights Court, HRC. 16 years later, since the lifting of Daud, and 15 years after the 1999 massacres, not a single perpetrator of these gross violations of human rights against innocent Acehnese has been brought to justice. And almost 9 years after the Helsinki Accord signed, nothing has changed with regard to protecting of human rights and resolving the past abuses by security forces. Last month, Acheh's House of Representatives, the local parliament, passed a bylaw in regard to TRC, and Jakarta has yet to approve it. But Human Rights Watch already stated that, I quote, violations in Aceh were too serious to be addressed only by the Truth Commission, which cannot impose criminal penalties. States have an obligation under international law to prosecute serious abuses of human rights and war crimes, unquote. The then Asia Director at Human Rights Watch, Brad Adam, pointed out in May 2006 that was 1 year after the Helsinki Accord. I quote again, the military leaders who committed crimes in Aceh have been rewarded, not punished. The international community has pursued justice to past abuses in East Timor, as well as in Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and the former Yugoslavia. Why should Aceh be treated any differently? He wondered. One also should wonder why and how this tragedy has been played and performed, and the perpetrators have escaped justice for the last 64 years. Ladies and gentlemen, about 62 years ago, the United Nations adopted a resolution, and how this tragedy has been played and performed, and the perpetrators have escaped justice for the last 64 years. Ladies and gentlemen, about 62 years ago, the United Nations adopted a resolution, UN Resolution 637A, 18 December 1952, with regard to solving human rights issues. I quote, the right of peoples and nations for self-determination is a preliminary condition of full realization of human rights. We therefore urge the international community to support and uphold the right of Achenis to work on self-determination as a fundamental part of the human rights. And it is also the duty of the UN to prevent the political and human rights of the Achenis from being usurped by Indonesia on the grounds of the so-called territorial integrity and the so-called internal affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Thank you for your participation and your patience, please.
The time of question is limited, and so I would like to give immediately the floor to Mrs. Marta Meyer, that will speak about the current human rights situation in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the UNPO and the Nonviolent Radical Party Transition and Transformation for inviting me to share with you an overview on the human rights situation in Indonesia. My name is Marta Meyer. I'm an independent human rights advisor, and I'm concentrating on three fields: Indonesia, impunity, and impact assessment. In this presentation, first I want to give you a brief history, because history is important in this case, and then an overview of human rights problems using three types of indicators. As to the history, several centuries of colonial repression by the Dutch colonizer ended when Indonesia proclaimed its independence in 1945 and fought its independence war from 1945 until 1949. In this period, many and manifold human rights violations have been perpetrated, and possibly also war crimes and crimes against humanity. I must note here that the willingness among the Dutch authorities to account for these is minimal, to say the least. I go to the third type of indicators, the result indicators. And again, I have a list. I can't help it that I do it that way. There are violations on what they call integrity rights, the integrity of the body. And that is the right to life. There are arbitrary executions of people suspected of crimes before they are even tried. There are disappearances in Indonesia, enforced disappearances, and there is the death penalty, and just last year Indonesia has reiterated executions of people under the death penalty. There is torture. The police and military need confessions, and therefore they have to torture suspects. In Indonesia there even are fights between the police and the military. A special unit like Kopassus, the special troops, and Densus 88 are known for their very harsh performance when arresting suspects. And on the whole, there is a lack of accountability mechanisms. Military courts can be regarded as partial, not impartial. And that leads to impunity, which makes it for future perpetrators easier to carry out violations. The right to a fair trial is being violated very often. The judiciary mafia, justice is really completely for sale everywhere. Even the chairperson of the Constitutional Court has been arrested a few months ago for suspected corruption, and the testimony is going into the direction that he really is guilty, the chairman of the Constitutional Court. In conclusion, in many ways human rights in Indonesia are being violated. People are individually and as groups repressed and intimidated, and there is a situation of impunity. The perpetrators of violations are not held accountable and are not brought to court. And that is continuing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Yusuf, representing the Republic of Malacca Straits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Distinguished representatives of the Nonviolent Radical Party, Mrs. Daud, distinguished representatives of UNPO, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. We were asked to come with two concrete cases of violation of human rights. Before talking about these cases, I would like to begin with the following. The Republic of Indonesia has been grossly, intentionally, and structurally violating numerous human rights in the Moluccas between 1950 and 2014. The brutal violation of these rights, committed by army and police units, my colleague might call them security forces, we call them unsecurity forces, has always been a reaction to the aspirations of our people to exercise our inalienable right to self-determination, and it is an action to break our resistance against the illegal occupation of our homeland. The human rights violations of the Republic of Indonesia